Ministry of Science and Technology of Government of India in association with Vijnana Bharati to promote creativity in science, technology and innovation for prosperous India by engaging creative and imaginative minds in India and across the globe to celebrate science through various programs and activities connected to the 5 pillars of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Today, as a part of IISF outreach program, CSIR National Aerospace Laboratories, Bengaluru is organizing a webinar by Dr. Shivsai Ajit Dikshit from IITM Pune. Welcome to the webinar, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
I also welcome all the invitees and participants who have joined through WebEx and also webcast. I now request Dr. Jatinder Singh, Chief Scientist and Head Flight Mechanics and Controls Division and Cluster Chairman, CSIR NAL, to introduce the today's speaker.
I find immense pleasure to introduce Dr. Shivsai Ajit Dikshit on this occasion. Dr. Shivsai Ajit Dikshit obtained his Bachelor of Engineering from Department of Mechanical Engineering, Government College of Engineering, Pune in 2001, and Masters and PhD from Department of Aerospace Engineering, IISc Bangalore. He is currently working as Scientist E at the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, Pune. Prior to this, he was teaching in Department of Atmospheric and Space Sciences, Savitribai Phule, Pune University, SPPU, Pune, Department of Mechanical Engineering, MKSSS, Cummins College of Engineering for Women, Pune. He has also guided several PhD students and has published many papers in reputed national and international journals. He has received many awards and achievements to his credit. Here we have a long list. Just to name a few, he has received Professor A.K. Rao Gold Medal for the best PhD thesis in the Department of Aerospace Engineering at IISc Bangalore for the academic year 2009-2010. Mrs. Sabita Chaudhary Memorial Gold Medal for the best ME student in the Department of Aerospace Engineering at IISc Bangalore for the academic year 2002-2003. He has also been listed in the roll of honor at the Department of Aerospace Engineering, IISc Bangalore. Forbes Marshall Best Project Award 2001 for the B project entitled Mechanical Table Draw of Form Fill Seal Machine. He has been a rank holder throughout his academic career. It is indeed an honor, Dr. Shivsai, to have you here today with us. And I would now request you to deliver your lecture on turbulent drag in boundary layers from laboratory to atmosphere. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for that really overwhelming introduction, and it's a great pleasure to deliver a talk at NAL. I have been associated with NAL in different ways. I will let you know about that later on. But I think since we are already 10 minutes into the schedule, I think I will start immediately with my talk. Let me share my screen. All right. So, as the title of my talk today suggests here, I'm going to look at our recent studies on turbulent drag in boundary layers. It's a very important problem from a technological and practical application viewpoint, as well as from the abstract ideas of turbulence. But the main emphasis of my talk will be on how to take laboratory studies to atmosphere, because typically the criticism which is often advanced in such explorations is that atmospheric flows have huge Reynolds numbers which cannot be simply mimicked in the laboratory. Notwithstanding that, we have been able to make some advances, and this is I think the right time to share that. Of course, this is not going to involve high-speed subsonic and transonic and supersonic hypersonic flows. This is a talk based purely on the low-speed subsonic regime. Since we have all the regimes at NL, I think I should clarify that in the beginning itself. So I will be presenting the talk, but Mr. Abhishek Gupta, who is my PhD student, he has contributed significantly, along with Mr. Harish Chaudhary, who is project scientist in our lab, and of course my project director here at IITM, Dr. Tara Prabhakaran. She has been immensely contributing to whatever we do at the Fluid Dynamics Laboratory at IITM Pune. All right. So since this IISF is largely for getting young minds interested in science, I would start my talk not with bombardment of papers and results and so on, but give a quick recap of what turbulent drag is all about. So what is shown here is a typical turbulent boundary layer velocity profile, mean velocity profile, u, which is a function of the wall normal distance z. X is the streamwise coordinate. I'm following your meteorological convention for wall normal distance being denoted as z. Usually in engineering applications, it is denoted as y. Uh, so u of z is the mean velocity profile in the vertical direction, and the direction of the flow is shown by this arrow. And we know that the boundary layer exists between the free stream, which is moving at u infinity, and the wall, which is stationary, and the thickness of the boundary layer is delta. And when turbulence is there, uh, in addition to just having a mean velocity profile, you have fluctuations in the flow that are correlated with each other, giving significant products of fluctuations, non-zero averages, and these can be looked at in terms of turbulent eddies. And finally, at the surface or at the wall, you have a drag which the flow experiences, or by Newton's third law, it's the same force with which the flow will try to drag the surface along with it. Uh, so the drag at the surface is because it is distributed over the area. Usually its intensity is considered, which is nothing but the wall shear stress. So it is the drag force per unit surface area. And by Newton's law of viscosity, one may write the drag, this wall shear stress tau wall, in terms of the velocity, the gradient of mean velocity at the wall. That means at z equal to 0. Nu here is the kinematic viscosity of the fluid. It is very useful to express the wall shear stress in terms of a velocity scale. It's not a physical velocity, it's a velocity scale, which is defined as the friction velocity. It's a definition. So wall shear stress by definition is rho u tau square, where u tau is the friction velocity. Therefore, u tau can be considered as a measure of drag of the flow. So in what follows, we will be talking more about u tau, but we will be mentioning it as drag. So the connection is based on these ideas. Now, the turbulent drag has been studied for quite some time, and there is something which is known as classical scaling of turbulent drag. It is there in all the textbooks, and just to give a recap of what scaling is all about, scaling is nothing but uh, trying to seek universal relationships amongst non-dimensional variables of interest. Okay, so for the problem of turbulent drag in a boundary layer, traditionally, the problem has been looked at in terms of the friction velocity u tau, the free stream velocity of the flow, which is u infinity, the thickness of the boundary layer, which is delta, and the kinematic viscosity of the fluid, which is nu. Sometimes for instead of delta, people use theta, which is an integral quantity called momentum thickness, but it doesn't matter. Whatever we use, it's basically some sort of a thickness. Now, when you consider these four parameters and apply Buckingham's pi theorem of dimensionless analysis, you get the classical scaling of skin friction as u tau over u infinity, which is nothing but the square root of the skin friction coefficient. And it's supposed to be a universal function of flow Reynolds number defined in terms of delta u infinity and nu. What is to be noticed here is the parameters u tau and delta, they are being made it dimensionless using u infinity as the velocity scale. Okay, so u tau is being divided by u infinity, delta is being multiplied by u infinity, and of course divided by nu, to make these parameters non-dimensional. So the key point is, in the classical scaling of skin friction, which is reported in textbooks and papers till date, the velocity scale which is used for dimensionless numbers is the free stream velocity scale u infinity. Now, with this u infinity, there is a conceptual difficulty. It may not be, it was not probably realized as a difficulty, but it's slightly bit awkward because free stream velocity is more like a boundary condition on the flow. Okay, it's not coming from the governing dynamics of the flow, but it's actually an outer boundary condition. At z equal to delta, the velocity is u infinity. That is the sort of prescription we have. So now the question is this u infinity the same as what would the governing dynamics allow you to use, or is there a sort of different dynamically consistent velocity scale rather than boundary condition? Is there a dynamically consistent velocity scale which can be used to formulate the description of the track? So this is what we investigated in our recent paper, which is published in Physics of Fluids. Interested people can take a look at the paper. This is in more detail. So in the first part of the talk, I'll be talking more about this paper, okay, the results in the paper. So what we did was we started with, in order to see whether the governing dynamics gives rise to any scale, we started with the momentum integral equation for the zero pressure gradient boundary layer flows. So on the left side, it is the skin friction coefficient divided by 2. On the right side, it is the rate of change of momentum thickness theta in the streamwise direction. Now, if you rearrange this and go one step back, actually, when this momentum integral is derived, it's derived from this second equation. But if you go one step back, it is actually rewritable like this. Now, one thing which is important to realize is we are now trying to look at the asymptotic form of this equation. So what do we mean by asymptotic form? If the Reynolds number of the flow tends to boundary layer flow tends to infinity, what happens to this equation? That is what we are interested in. Now, it's an interesting thing which is already known that if the Reynolds number, so the Reynolds number here is defined as delta plus, which is Re tau, which is delta u tau by nu, and delta plus tending to infinity is the asymptotic condition we are trying to look at. So it is known that when the boundary layer Reynolds number becomes infinitely large, the rate of growth of the boundary layer becomes negligibly small. That means d delta by dx actually tends to 0. Now, if d delta by dx tends to 0, you can see that in the integral, which is seen faint now above in the previous step, the upper limit of integration actually now becomes independent of x. So then asymptotically, we can push this d dx sign inside the integral and rewrite the whole equation as this. Okay, so this is a result which is applicable in the asymptotic limit. So the moment you write this, it's immediately it's immediately revealing that u tau square on the left side is going to be of the same order as any of the two terms on the right hand side. So let's say that it's of the order of the first term here. Now this first term I can simply write as, I can again pull this d dx out from this first term. Okay, and then what I realize is the integral of u square dz, what remains from 0 to delta, is nothing but the kinematic momentum flux through the boundary layer. Okay, so my u tau square is actually going to be of the same order as my the change of my kinematic momentum flux. Okay, so what is important from this particular step is that the momentum flux is an important quantity, right? So m goes like u square into some length, that is the contention. Now this step is showing you that u tau is going to be a relevant velocity scale all across the boundary layer for u. So that means when the Reynolds number tends to infinity, u tau also becomes a velocity scale all through the boundary layer. This is something which people have been debating a lot in the literature, but this equation shows that it's going to be the case. So the definition of m, I can now use that definition to rewrite m as m goes like u tau square into delta, because u goes like u tau, and the thickness of the boundary layer is going to be the relevant length scale for the outer flow. So my momentum rate is going to scale like u tau square by u tau square into delta. This is something which is very revealing, because the moment you rearrange this, you get a new asymptotic skin friction law, which has the power minus half. So there are two non-dimensional parameters, u tau tilde and delta tilde, and u tau tilde. If you write the expression, you will see that u tau tilde is nothing but u tau divided by m by nu. So you remember that u infinity was here in the classical scaling. Now it has been replaced by a new velocity scale, which is m by nu. Similarly, delta tilde is again a Reynolds number, but defined in a different way. Delta is the length scale. The velocity scale is not u infinity now, it is m by nu and divided by nu again. And there is this typical minus half power law relationship. Now this result is supposed to be valid asymptotically. So what does this mean? What it means is that the boundary layer kinematic momentum flux m and the fluid kinematic viscosity nu, they together conspire to set a dynamically relevant velocity scale for drag in turbulent boundary layers. Okay, so this is something which is very revealing. We found it extremely useful, and then we started looking at data from a variety of flows in the literature. We considered the complete range of Reynolds numbers, which was covered by direct numerical simulations as well as laboratory flows. So it's a huge range of Reynolds numbers in terms of delta plus or Re tau, delta u tau by nu. It's starting from 10 power 2 of the order to 10 power 4. Now this range I mean, experimentalists can readily recognize that this is a very wide range of Reynolds numbers. Okay, so what is shown here on the left side is the classical scaling. So u tau by u infinity is plotted against Re theta as well as Re delta, and two sets of curves are seen, one for Re theta, one for Re delta. What you can see is the collapse between the points is not very great. Okay, in the classical scaling also the collapse is not very great. The moment we move to our new variables u tau tilde and delta tilde, these are the new coordinates suggested by our asymptotic scaling law. The moment we do that, we see that the data actually remarkably line up. Now, in order to see how well this lineup is, we need to closely examine these data. So what we do is, it appears that in this log-log plot, in the previous plot, in this plot, because it's log-log axis, there has to be something like a power law variation. So when we closely observe, we see that there are actually two power laws. For the lower Reynolds number regime, which we have arbitrarily defined up to delta tilde of 10 power 10, there is one log law, which there is one power law, which is seen as this blue curve. Beyond 10 power 10, there is another power law, which is seen by this dashed curve. Now, if you see the exponents of these power law fits, you can see that these exponents are very close to minus half actually. And there is also a trend for lower Reynolds number regime. It's slightly more away from minus half, and it is getting closer to minus half as the Reynolds number is jacked up. Okay, so these are we can say these are discrete power law descriptions of the scaling. Remember, the minus half power law is going to be there in the asymptotic limit or the infinite Reynolds number limit, but for finite Reynolds numbers, the power is only slightly different than minus half. But yes, there is a difference in the power, and that is what is known as the finite Reynolds number effect. Now, how to account for this finite Reynolds number effect? So one way to account for that is do a regimization like this and have two power laws for two regimes. But is it possible to have a single function which expresses all this Reynolds number dependence. So what we proposed is a power law relation of this sort, where A delta tilde raised to B and A and B coefficients we expanded in terms of asymptotic series, and we made some good guesses or judicious guesses about the functional forms of the gauge functions, and all those details can be found in our paper. And finally we end up with this sort of an expression which looks pretty intractable, because you have a log of delta tilde that is acceptable, because many logarithmic variations are very well known in turbulent boundary layers. But then the square root of log of Reynolds number also pops up, and there is delta tilde raised to this whole thing. So the central point is that this is a single equation which is going to explain the complete regime from all the way from low Reynolds numbers to high Reynolds numbers. Now, in order to evaluate how well these models perform, the discrete as well as the continuous, what we did was we took only selected data points covering the entire range, spaced reasonably in the Reynolds number axis, log Reynolds number axis, and remaining data points we use these data points to actually fit the models, and then we use remaining data points to compute the value of u star and then compare with the actual one. So we actually did some prediction, and the results of those predictions they are shown here. If you go by the standards, so the left panel is the standard um, uh, Fernolz's correlation for the classical scaling. If you do that, then against RE theta, what is plotted is the estimated value of u tau divided by the actual value of u tau. What you can see is that within plus minus 2.5%, which is typical of zero pressure gradient boundary layer studies, the data collapse reasonably well, but RMS error is also computed here. The second panel shows the results of our discrete model, where a similar RMS error is seen. So discrete model also performs reasonably well, as good as or at par with the classical scaling. So the scaling has definitely not deteriorated. But what you can see is that the RMS error is minimum for the continuous model. So continuous model is actually performing much better, and especially these purple points, which are the Stanford data points of DeGraff and Eaton, they have come inside the band now, and that is the reason the RMS error has reduced. So the continuous model gives a good description of the complete range of Reynolds numbers, and it explains the drag very well. And all this actually comes from the asymptotic scaling arguments for the scaling of drag and a dynamically consistent scale, which is m by nu. Now, so far so good. We got these results from laboratory flows, and then of course we are doing some nice experiments. I'll try to show towards the end of the talk in our lab. The idea of this m nu scaling we got from somewhere else actually, and since nobody had investigated this idea in boundary layers, we tried to apply it for zero pressure gradient boundary layers, and the results I've already shown. The next task, we said, let's try to apply this into the atmosphere. Now, in the atmosphere, there are several questions. For example, over tropical land, the typical boundary layer height is about 1 to 2 kilometers, depending on convection, cloud cover, and if there is any large scale ascent or descent. Based on all these, the, the height is tremendous. The velocities are not very different. They are of the same order, like 10 meters per second, 12 meters per second, and so on. But the height is huge. It's very different compared to what you get in the laboratory, and that's the reason for Reynolds numbers being what they are, very high in case of atmospheric boundary layers. Straight away you get a 10 power 4, 10 power 5 change, or 4 decade change in the Reynolds number, simply because the height is large. Now the question is, in order to apply our MU scaling, how do we, for that we need to measure the velocity profile of the horizontal wind in the atmospheric boundary layer. How do we do that? Because there are a variety of techniques, but the most easy is remote sensing instruments. So wind profilers, wind lidars, they depend on the backscattering due to density or aerosol concentration variations, and they give reliable estimates up to 1 or 2 kilometers. But the catch is that if on some particular day the aerosols are not available, or density variations are weak, then you will not get enough backscatter, and signal to noise ratio becomes a big problem. And the another major point is that the first height at which you get a measurement, or the first echo that you receive from, is about 500 meters from the ground. So you lose almost half of the boundary layer when you use these remote sensing instruments. So remote sensing instruments uh, cannot really give you accurate measurements of the momentum rate through the boundary layer. The other option is micrometeorological towers, but again, the height of the tower, because it is erected on the surface of the earth, height can be about 100 meters at the most, or 200 meters in very rare cases. But still, you will measure only in what is known as the surface layer of the atmospheric boundary layer. The atmospheric boundary layer has, by and large, two layers. One is very close to the surface, of the order of few hundred meters. It's called surface layer, and above that is what is known as the is known as the mixed layer, where a lot of mixing is happening because of convection. So we found that radio sonde profiling is actually a robust and viable alternative. Now, what is radio sonde? Radio sonde is just an instrument which has sensors for measurement of pressure, temperature, and humidity. So it actually measures pressure, temperature, and humidity, and there is a UHF transmitter which transmits data to the ground station. This radio sonde instrument is tied using a thin, strong, long thread to a meteorological balloon. I will show some photograph. These balloons are typically 1 meter diameter on the ground. When they go all the way up to 25-30 kilometers, the diameter becomes something like 10 meters, which is very large. And they are filled with hydrogen gas. One has to be very careful while filling with hydrogen gas. And once the balloon is released, the horizontal wind components are actually inferred by tracking the sounding via GPS. So as the sounding is moving in lat long, the movement, the velocities are computed by doing dx dt and dy dt, delta x delta t and delta y delta t over lat and long. UHF antenna on the ground receives the data. GPS antenna is used for tracking the sounding for its position. Now, the drawback of this instrument is that as the balloon is going up, it is measuring various parameters, and the velocities are getting inferred. But the velocity measured at every height is being measured at a different instant of time. Every measurement is a different instant of time. So but every measurement is instantaneous. All measurements are at different instants of time, but every measurement is instantaneous. So the profile obtained is neither instantaneous nor time averaged. So that is the difficulty. But what we have found is that even if one does some estimates, then especially the momentum rate that we are interested in, it will have only error of just few percent, not more than that. And given the uncertainties, larger uncertainties in atmospheric flows, this uncertainty is not going to play much of a role. So these are some photographs. So this is our campaign site, cloud aerosol interaction precipitation enhancement experiment, phase number 4. So KIPEX phase number 4, we have a ground site at an engineering college in Solapur, and on the terrace of their building, we have this UHF antenna for radio sonde, and this GPS antenna for radio sonde. And this is another look at the UHF antenna. It's a dome, and you can see this is typically the monsoon time. You can see the clouds very well. Now this is again a photograph of how the sounding is launched. So on that particular day, we had our director visiting the lab. So we had the balloon launch at his hands. So the one with the balloon in hand is our director, Professor Ravi Nanjundaya. He moved back from IITM to IISc now recently. So this is the med balloon filled with hydrogen gas. Radio sonde he is holding in his hands, and that's me. That's me facing back to the camera. So the radio sonde typically looks like this. This is the instrument on the right side, and on the left side you see a spool with the thread. So this spool will actually unwind as the sounding is released, and it will maintain a distance of about 20 meters from the balloon, so that the readings are not getting affected by the presence of the balloon itself. Uh, So momentum rate through the boundary layer can be obtained using radio sonde profiles, and the height of the boundary layer can also be obtained using radio sonde profiles. But what happens to the measurement of the wall shear stress, or the measurement of the surface momentum flux, as it is called? So for that, we have a tower which is erected very close to the ground site. So within few tenths of a meters, this tower is there. Now this tower, we use data from for our analysis. We use data from two different sites. So Solapur, I have already shown you. There was another experiment in 2011 in Mehboob Nagar near Hyderabad. So these two experiments we used, and radio sonde data are available for these two sites. And just in the launch window of the radio sonde, in first few minutes, first 10 minutes or so, the sonde will actually cross the boundary layer and go up. So we have to take only the half an hour data from the sonic anemometers on this tower to actually get the value of U star. And by doing an average of the fluctuations over that half an hour, we get the corresponding values of U star. And the radio sonde flights cover all sorts of conditions from near neutral to convective. All these are done in daytime observations, so there is nothing like stable boundary layers in the night and so on. So whatever results we are going to show, they are for near neutral and convective cases. How do we decide the boundary layer height? So this is the typical profile, vertical profile observed by radio sonde of the potential temperature. So as you can see, the potential temperature drops quickly initially when the sonde is released from the surface, then remains almost constant because the sounding is going through the mixed layer of the boundary layer. And because of a lot of mixing, uh, the the temperature or the scalars have reasonably uniform concentrations, so the potential temperature stays put, and beyond a point there is a sharp change in the potential temperature gradient. Okay, so that point where you see that is typically identified as the edge of the boundary layer delta, or in meteorological convention it is denoted by Zi, Z sub I. Okay, now let's we got all this data from radio sonde and co-located tower observations. So we have U star data, and we have the boundary layer thickness delta and momentum rate m computed from radio sonde, and then we plotted in our plot if this U tau tilde against delta tilde. So we saw this plot earlier for laboratory flows. Now we are seeing the same plot for atmospheric flows. Now these flows, triangles are actually Mehboob Nagar data, circles are Solapur data. They are falling on each other quite reasonably well, and the curve fit of our model, uh, which is directly picked from our physics of fluids paper, that curve fit is done here. Only one difference is there. In the physics of fluids paper, we had that asymptotic power to be minus half. So this B1 coefficient was B1, the exponent, first term in the asymptotic expansion was minus half. Right now here it is not minus half because in atmospheric boundary layers, surface roughness is important. It's not a smooth wall flow. So you will not get this minus half as the asymptotic power. So that is why that B1 was kept floating. So when we do this, we get this model fit, and now what we do is, using the model fit, we compute back the values of U tau. Okay, and see the deviations. How much is the difference between the value given by the model and the value which has been actually measured? So once we do that, what we see is U tau is plotted on x-axis. U tau um, by non-convective model. NC model is non-convective model. We have still not brought in the effects of convection. So U tau from the non-convective model, you see that the data is reasonably scattered around the 45-degree line. These are the lines of plus minus 20% and plus minus 40% band. So you can see that almost 89% of the data points lie in plus minus 40% band. Now, the inherent uncertainty in the friction velocity measurement in atmospheric boundary layers, that itself is about plus minus 20%. So given that, this scatter, I would say that it is not very bad. It's not great, of course, but it's not very bad, because the inherent uncertainty itself is 20%, and we have almost all the data in plus minus 40%. But the question is, can we improve this? And why we think we could improve this? Because there is no convection accounted for in our model. Our model is simply an extension of the laboratory zero pressure gradient boundary layers, but those are near neutral boundary layers. Okay, there are no convection effects there. So how do we incorporate the convection effects? That's the second question. So in atmosphere, what happens is that, especially in atmospheric boundary layer, the convection and shear, these are the two mechanisms by which turbulence is produced. So people typically talk of convection being strong or weak with respect to the shear. So it is never like convection is very strong. You have to always ask, in comparison to shear, how strong is the convection, right? So the point is that the same absolute value of convection can prove to be less effective or more effective depending on the shear. Now, what is characterized by, how is the shear characterized? If the boundary layer contains strong winds, then the wind shear will be stronger. If the wind shear is stronger, then the convection is weaker. So high wind in the boundary layer is going to imply something like weaker convection. Okay. So we need some sort of measure of the wind speeds in the boundary layer. So a simple measure could be bulk velocity. So bulk velocity UB we are defining as a simple mass average over the, of course, density variations are not taken into account. It's simple a kinematic average of velocity over the entire boundary layer. Okay, density variations are not that great, I would say, in just 1 kilometer. This is like a zeroth order approximation. So it's a proxy. This bulk velocity can be used as a proxy for convection. So if the bulk velocity is large, that means shear is strong. That means convection is less. If bulk velocity is less, then convection will prove to be stronger. Because the surface of the earth gets heated up every day by almost the same amount. Of course, you have seasonal changes, but one day and the next day, there is no great change unless cloud cover is there. There is no great change in solar irradiation. Okay, so the point is, same convection can prove to be less strong or weak depending on the winds. There is another velocity scale, which is the Wright Royal Convective Velocity Scale in the atmospheric literature, that is known as Deardorff scale, and that contains the surface heat flux W prime theta prime computed at the surface, and this Zi is the boundary layer height. So the contention is that the surface heat flux is going to give rise to thermals or plumes that are going to go all the way into the mixed layer, all up to the top of the boundary layer, and therefore this W star is a relevant velocity scale for convective boundary layers, pure convection. Now you can see here that if the heat flux is large, this W star will be large. That means if the convection is more, then W star is more, and vice versa. Okay, so W star is also a measure of convection. Now here is the key. Since our model is dimensionless, we need a measure of convection which is dimensionless. Now we have seen that UB can also be used as a proxy and W star is also available. So what about the ratio UB by W star? Because that is a very attractive dimensionless measure. But it has to be consistent. It should not be that both the numerator and denominator are varying in the same direction so that the ratio is always a constant, almost a constant. Then it won't make sense. It won't serve the purpose. But fortunately for us, this doesn't happen, because as convection is strong, UB will be weak. But if convection is strong, W star will be large. So this ratio will be very small. If convection is less, then UB will be strong and W star will be small. So the ratio will be large. So it's moving in only in one direction. and the ratio as a whole, and therefore that is good. Yes. So now what we propose is we propose a compensation in our model variables using this convection parameter. So what we do is we define a change of variable from u tau tilde to u tau tilde prime using this ub by w star to some power p. And similarly, we convert delta tilde to delta tilde prime using ub by w star to some power q. So this is the compensation which is introduced for accounting convection effects. With this compensation, the same model, we say that the same functional form of the model is valid, but these are compensated variables. And what is the reason for that? The reason is if p is 0 and q is 0, then I should get back my zero pressure gradient model, which is for the laboratory flows near neutral conditions. Now, on the right side here, I've given some estimates. So if you go to the data and check, the W star value is almost 1 meters per second. Sometimes it is 1.2, sometimes it is 1.5, sometimes it is 0.5, 0.6, and so on, but it always stays close to 1 meters per second. So as a zeroth order approximation, it's not a bad idea to set it almost equal to 1. Okay, so the moment we set it equal to 1, there is a reason for that, because we have only one equation and there are two unknowns actually. U tau is an unknown we are chasing, and W star is also an unknown that we should chase. But since W star is always close to 1, we can make this approximation and get away with only one equation in u star, and let's see how good that equation performs, because we are anyway accounting for convection through this ub. Okay, so this is now u tau tilde plotted against delta tilde, and this is the model fit. You can see visually that the scatter has slightly improved. uh, here it was scattered in a particular way, and here it is scattered in a particular way, but the real proof of the pudding is in the eating. So let's go and um, uh, check the deviations. So if we compute the deviations, we see some remarkable improvement now. Okay, so these were the deviations before. So this is the non-convective model that we had, and you can see that the data were quite a lot scattered. And now with the inclusion of convection effects, you see that the scatter has reduced considerably. And now within 40% band, almost 95% of the data points, these are almost 200 data points. So 95% of the data points come within plus minus 40%, which is quite remarkable given the uncertainties. Now, what are the uncertainties that could be present in this? First of all, we are not measuring the velocities directly. We are computing the velocities through the GPS coordinates of the radio sonde, and that too, the whole profile is not instantaneous, neither it is time averaged. For the laboratory flows, it is the average velocity profile which is important. So that could introduce some uncertainty in the value of m. Plus there are a lot of other inherent uncertainties in atmospheric flows and variabilities. So given all those, this kind of collapse is, we believe, quite remarkable, and this is something which we are cleaning up and writing. This is the ongoing work that we are doing. So the point is just to motivate these young minds. The whole purpose of IISF, the point is that whatever you do in the laboratory, there is always a way uh, uh, to uh, to connect it in some way to the real atmosphere. Now you can see that this is the results that we are getting are quite remarkable, because the Reynolds number range is huge. We are doing something in the laboratory and then trying to apply in the atmosphere, and it is showing some remarkable improvement. And such a small scatter we have not seen with any other methods. So conclusions, I'm close to the end. Kinematic flux through the boundary layer sets a dynamically relevant velocity scale. This is important because this is the concept, this is the footing. Then laboratory data show that the scaling is supported very well. There is a continuous finite Reynolds number model, and the scaling shows promising results when extended to atmospheric boundary layers. Stability conditions have been absorbed using bulk velocity and convective scale. Now, there is a deeper implication for this. What is the implication? See, traditionally, the surface friction velocity in atmospheric context is called as the surface layer momentum flux, and that has been considered as a surface layer parameter. It is a parameter which is influenced by the motions in the surface layer. Now, what we are saying is it's profound. What we are saying is the momentum rate of the whole boundary layer is contributing to the friction velocity at the surface. That is something which is more deep. And in laboratory flows, there is increasing evidence that you have these larger outer scales driving the inner flow in a manner that you have amplitude modulation and then huge contribution to mean skin friction, which continually increases with Reynolds number and so on. And this sort of scaling fits in very nicely in those ideas. All right, so I'm close, but I want to show a few slides on my lab. But before that, let me acknowledge the Director IITM for the support. Ministry of Earth Sciences has been very instrumental in providing us support for all the facilities in the fluid dynamics lab. My collaborators and my mentors, Professor O.N. Ramesh from IISc, and of course, the late Professor Narasimha, we miss him a lot. Dr. Vidyadhar Mutkavi and Dr. L. Venkatakrishnan from NL, they have been very supportive always for the development of my lab at IITM. And of course, I would like to dedicate this talk to the memory of the late Professor Roddam Narasimha, whose insightful discussions are deeply missed these days. Quickly, I will show you some photographs of the lab. So it's a very small lab, I must say, compared to NL. This is nothing, but it's a small lab and it's one of its kind as far as Ministry of Earth Sciences institutions are concerned. We are working right now on a setup called WallJet, which can be seen in the left figure. You have a settling chamber here and a plate on which the two-dimensional jet flows. Then a pitot tube has been mounted on this traverse. A hot wire anemometer, anemometry probe is seen on the right side figure here. So this is our WallJet setup. Interestingly, we have found that this WallJet is a laboratory analog of what are known as low-level jets in the atmosphere. And we are investigating that connection very deeply. We have got some very interesting results which could have a lot of implications for how the boundary layers are parameterized in weather forecasting models, especially when the low level jet is present. In our WallJet flow, we had to measure skin friction using oil film interferometry. So these are the fringe images of oil film interferometry. And of course, we have PIV, 2D PIV. Right now, we have volumetric PIV also, but right now we have done some long field of view measurements in WallJets. Some very interesting results have shown up. What we see is that because of the long field of view, we are able to capture long wavelengths, and those long wavelengths in the outer jet region of the flow, they have a very strong impact on the near wall region of the flow. So in wall jets, the flow near the wall is by no means similar to what is there in the boundary layers. So there are some exciting experiments we are doing in the lab. So if some people get really interested, they could send an email to me or something like that, and then they can have, or if it's possible, if the corona COVID restrictions permit, they can even visit the lab in the future. All right, thank you for your attention, and I am open to questions now.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for a very detailed and interesting lecture. There may not be any questions because we have not open WebEx link to any students or the participants. It's only webcast one way. So if we receive any questions through our WebEx chat, we will pass it on to you so that we can get the answers and pass it to them. And now I request Dr. Abhay Pashilkar, Chief Scientist and Head Systems Engineering Division and Program Director, Civil Aircraft Programs of CSIR NEF for his remarks.
Yeah, so firstly, thank you to Dr. Dikshit for a very fascinating talk on atmospheric boundary layers. So IITM and NAL, as he has pointed out, share a very deep connection. One is through Professor Roddam Narasimha, and also some of our scientists, Dr. Mutkavi and Dr. Venkat Krishnan have been associated with setting up some of the facilities there. I recall a visit to IITM some time back as part of a team, as part of the committee which was looking at purchasing some drones for you
Oh,
to do some
yes, yes,
atmospheric
correct,
studies. Yes.
correct,
So
correct.
yes. One is on the technical front. The lecture was particularly interesting because we got an insight into how boundary layers work in atmosphere. Of course, at CSIR NAL, we are making civil aircraft. So for us, boundary layers are important, but the dimensions are, as you rightly pointed out, much smaller, of the order of millimeters.
Yeah,
But nonetheless, the physics is important to both of us, and
correct.
to capture that in the form of a model. Modeling simulation is another great way of building products, building aircraft, and to get a better understanding, maybe by analysis, by simulation. We also brought in the experimental aspect of these things and how every model has to track reality in a sense. And clearly, for a civil aircraft, that is also equally important. Drag is something which is particularly important for us. And so we see
Yes,
great value in this. And as part of this Amrit Mahotsav, it's only right that two laboratories like this should come together and celebrate it, particularly in the context of the science that we are doing together. I
yes.
recall my first introduction to these boundary layers in the atmosphere by none other than Professor Narasimha, who gave a very illuminating talk on megatropics, the experiment which was done, and that is when I realized the scales involved in the atmosphere. Today is also a very important day for NAL because in the morning we had a flight of our octocopter. So I thought I will
Oh,
share this with you that we have now a
excellent.
20. Yeah, so we have a vehicle which is capable of carrying 20 kgs of payload. And right now we are targeting vaccine deliveries from the public health centers within the Karnataka state as well as today, in fact, in the presence of the Honorable Minister of State in Jammu, we have had a flight with our director present there along with the DG of the CSIR, Professor Shekhar Mande. That was a successful demonstration of our drone capabilities. So the reason why I'm highlighting that is simply because I think that association of IITM and NAL probably should continue in that direction. Perhaps these drones will help you along with Aerosonde and so many other devices to be able to.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think these drones they present a very nice opportunity to investigate these boundary layer sort of processes in quite great detail. We can mount the probes on the drone in some way so that the flow field of the drone itself doesn't affect the the thing that we are trying to measure. But I think this is very promising. I'm
Yeah.
sure I will do a lot of work at my end to actually come to some sort of a concrete proposal on this.
Sure. So I recall
Yeah.
your first atmospheric experiments were conducted with aircraft, with manned aircraft, and then you had this proposal of flying, unmanned drones. And today, I'm glad to say that NAL can support you further in that endeavor to actually conduct experiments. So, with those few words, I'd again like to thank Dr. Dikshit for a very illuminating talk, and we look forward to future more such interactions with NAL. Thank you indeed.
Sure.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I now request
Okay.
Dr. M. Manju Prasad, Chief Scientist and Head Knowledge and Technology Management Division and Advisor Works and Services of CSIR NAL to propose the vote of thanks.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yeah, yeah. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Sai Dikshit for readily accepting our invitation at such a short notice, because we had very short notice time to arrange for the whole thing. And of course, with the help of Dr. Mutkabi, we were able to contact him, and we would like to really thank him for readily accepting our invitation and for having delivered such an excellent lecture. I mean, he took us into the real world of uh, turbulent boundary layer flows with all the importance that the drag plays there, and its in turn its importance in the atmospheric studies. I think it's excellent talk. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thanks a lot.
I would like to thank our chief scientist and head of FMCD and the cluster chairman for Systems Engineering Division, Dr. Jatinder Singh, for having readily accepted to chair this session and conducting this whole webinar in an excellent way. Thank you very much, sir. I would like to thank our chief scientist and program director, Dr. Pashilkar, and who has given excellent feedback and excellent remarks on the lecture that we had today. Thank you very much, Dr. Pashilkar.
Thank you.
I also would like to take this opportunity to thank all the staff, especially from our director office and from ICTD and all, for having made such an excellent arrangements on a Saturday, because the Saturday is not a real working day for us, and all the other staff members who have readily cooperated in making this program a successful one. I thank one and all for the excellent conduct of this webinar. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll conclude the program now.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Namaste.